The auction block stood in the center of Benton's dusty Main Street, and Lily Ravencroft could barely breathe as rough hands pushed her forward onto the weathered wooden platform. It was July of 1878 in Montana Territory, and the summer heat pressed down on the small frontier town like a weight nobody could shake. Lily's wrists ached from the ropes that had bound them during the 3-day journey from the railhead where the debt collectors had seized her. Her father had gambled away everything before dying of consumption, leaving debts so massive that the creditors had claimed her as payment. The law allowed it. A woman without protection, without family, without means was property to be liquidated just like furniture or livestock. She stood there in her threadbare calico dress, 20 years old and trembling despite the oppressive heat. Men gathered around the platform, some leering, others merely curious. The auctioneer, a portly man with sweat staining his vest, cleared his throat and began his pitch. "Fine young woman here, gentlemen. Strong enough for farm work, young enough to bear children, and literate too according to the papers. Perfect for any man needing help with his homestead or business. We'll start the bidding at $50. Lily wanted to scream, to run, but there was nowhere to go. The men who had brought her here stood at the platform's edge, their hands resting on their gun belts. She had witnessed what happened to the woman before her who had tried to flee. The beating had been swift and brutal. Hands went up. Voices called out numbers. Lily recognized some of the bidders. There was Marcus Thornton, who ran the saloon and brothel at the edge of town. His smile made her stomach turn. Next to him stood Clayton Webb, a farmer known for working his hands near to death. 3 wives he had buried already, and none had lived past 30. $60, Thornton called out. 70, countered Webb. The numbers climbed. Lily felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her mother had been a proud woman before the fever took her, and she had taught Lily that dignity was something nobody could steal unless you surrendered it. Then she heard a voice that cut through the others like a knife through butter. $400. The crowd fell silent. Lily's eyes searched for the speaker and found him standing at the back of the gathered men. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his clean white shirt. Dark hair touched the collar of his shirt, and even from this distance, she could see eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore good boots, a leather vest, and a gun belt that looked well-maintained but not flashy. Everything about him suggested capability and substance. The auctioneer's eyes widened. 400. Sir, did you say 400? I did. The man stepped forward through the crowd, which parted for him readily. And I will pay double the next highest bid, whatever it may be, to end this spectacle. Thornton's face reddened. Now hold on, Jackson Fuller. You cannot just waltz in here and $800, Jackson said calmly, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. Cash, right now, unless someone here wants to bid 401 and watch me pay 802. The silence that followed was absolute. $800 was more than most men in Benton made in 2 years. It was a fortune, a sum that spoke of either madness or means well beyond the ordinary. The auctioneer licked his lips nervously. Going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Jackson Fuller for $800. Jackson pulled a leather wallet from his vest and counted out the money in crisp bills that he handed to the auctioneer. Then he climbed the steps to the platform. Up close, Lily could see the weathering on his face that suggested he was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a year or 2 more. He had strong features, a straight nose that had been broken at least once, and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. But his eyes held something she had not expected: kindness. Miss, he said quietly, removing his hat. My name is Jackson Fuller. I own a ranch about 5 miles west of town. I would be honored if you would accompany me there." Lily found her voice, though it came out rougher than she intended. "I do not have much choice, do I? You bought me." Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or regret. "No, madam. That is where you are wrong. I bought your debt, that is true, but I did not buy you. No man can own another person, regardless of what the law or circumstances might suggest." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and showed it to the auctioneer. "This is a release form, signed and witnessed by my lawyer in town. As soon as I pay the debt, which I have just done, the debt is satisfied and this woman is free of all legal obligation." The auctioneer frowned at the paper, clearly not pleased but unable to find fault with it. "This appears to be in order." Jackson turned back to Lily. "You are free, miss, free to go wherever you choose. I will give you money for passage on the next stage if you wish to leave Benton. Or if you are willing, I would like to offer you a job. My ranch needs help. The work is hard but honest. You would have your own room, fair wages, and my word as a gentleman that you would be treated with respect." Lily stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. Free? It had to be a trick. Men did not spend fortunes to free strangers from debt. But looking into his eyes, she saw no deception, only an earnestness that seemed almost painful. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "Because my mother raised me to believe that every person deserves dignity and choice, and because I could not stand by and watch you be sold to men who would use you poorly." Someone in the crowd laughed. "Fuller, you are a damned fool. $800 for nothing." Jackson's jaw tightened, but he did not look away from Lily. "I did not do it for nothing. I did it because I could and because it needed doing. Now, Miss Ravencroft, Lily Ravencroft, Miss Ravencroft, what do you say? Will you at least come to the ranch and consider my offer? You can make your decision there, away from all these eyes." Lily looked around at the crowd. Thornton was glaring at her with undisguised hatred. Webb looked disappointed. The other faces ranged from amused to confused to contemptuous. None of them offered her anything but misery if she stayed in town. "I will come," she said quietly. Jackson offered his hand to help her down from the platform. His grip was warm and steady, and for the first time in weeks, Lily felt something other than terror. She felt a tiny flicker of hope. He led her to a wagon hitched to 2 fine horses. The wagon bed was loaded with supplies: sacks of flour and beans, coils of rope, tools wrapped in oilcloth. Jackson helped her onto the seat with careful courtesy, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Benton, Lily kept her eyes forward. She could feel the stares following them, could hear the murmur of conversation starting up again. But Jackson seemed unbothered. He drove with easy confidence, letting the horses set their own comfortable pace. They rode in silence for a while. The land around Benton was beautiful in a stark way. Rolling hills covered in prairie grass stretched toward mountains that rose purple and magnificent in the distance. The sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at, and the wind carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. Finally, Jackson spoke. "I apologize for not asking sooner, but are you hungry? Thirsty? We have a ways to go yet." "I am well enough," Lily said, though her stomach was empty and her throat was dry. Pride would not let her accept more from this stranger who had already given so much. "Miss Ravencroft, I mean no disrespect, but you look like you have not eaten properly in days. There is a canteen under the seat and some bread and cheese wrapped in cloth. Please, help yourself. It is not charity. Anyone who rides in my wagon is entitled to share what I have." His tone was gentle but firm. Lily realized he was giving her a way to accept without surrendering her pride. She reached under the seat and found the items he had mentioned. The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp and good. She ate slowly, trying not to seem too hungry, but the food tasted better than anything she could remember. Jackson handed her the canteen without comment, and she drank gratefully. The water was cool and clean. "Thank you," she said when she had finished. "You are welcome." More silence. Then Lily asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why did you really do it? Men do not spend $800 out of pure kindness." Jackson was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "You are right to be skeptical. I will tell you the truth, though I ask that you believe me when I say I expect nothing from you in return. My mother was sold to pay her father's debts when she was 18. A man bought her, much like I bought yours. But he was not kind. He used her in every way a man can use a woman, and when she finally escaped, she was broken in ways that never fully healed. My father found her working in a laundry in Kansas City. He fell in love with her despite everything she had endured, or perhaps because of it. He saw her strength, her courage. They married, had me, and built a good life together. But my mother never forgot what it felt like to stand on that platform. She made me promise, when she was dying 3 years ago, that if I ever had the chance to save someone from that fate, I would. Today, I kept that promise." Lily felt tears prickling her eyes again, but this time they were not from fear or shame. "Your mother must have been a remarkable woman." "She was. You would have liked her, I think. She was strong like you." "You do not know that I am strong. You do not know anything about me." Jackson glanced at her with a small smile. "I know you did not cry up there. I know you held your head up when other women might have collapsed. I know you are still fighting, still thinking, still looking for the angle. That takes strength, Miss Ravencroft, more than you might realize." They crested a hill, and Lily saw the ranch spread out before them. It was more substantial than she had expected. A large house built of hewn logs stood in a grove of cottonwood trees. Beside it were a barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hills in the distance, and she could see several horses in the near pasture. "This is the Fuller Ranch," Jackson said. "I inherited it from my father when he passed last year. We run about 500 head of cattle and raise horses as well. I have 4 men who work here full-time and a few who come and go with the seasons. They are good men, or they would not be on my land. But if any of them makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." He drove the wagon to the main house and set the brake. Then he jumped down and came around to help Lily descend. She noticed that he released her hand the moment her feet touched the ground, never holding contact longer than necessary. The front door of the house opened, and a woman emerged. She was perhaps 50 years old, with gray streaking her brown hair and a face that suggested she smiled often. She wore a practical dress with an apron over it, and her hands were dusted with flour. "Jackson Fuller, what have you done now?" she called out, though her tone was more amused than angry. "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Lily Ravencroft. She will be staying with us at least for a while." "Miss Ravencroft, this is Mrs. Chen. She manages the house and does the cooking. She is also the only person on this ranch who can tell me what to do and get away with it." Mrs. Chen laughed. "That is because someone needs to keep you in line, boy. Miss Ravencroft, you look exhausted. Come inside. I will draw you a bath and find you some proper clothes. Jackson, you bring in whatever supplies need refrigeration, then make yourself scarce. This young lady needs rest, not you hovering around." Lily found herself shepherded into the house before she could protest. The interior was clean and well kept, with solid furniture that showed signs of care. The main room had a large fireplace, comfortable chairs, and shelves lined with books. Real books, not just a Bible and an almanac. Mrs. Chen led her upstairs to a bedroom that was simply furnished but pleasant. A bed with a real mattress, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the hills. "This will be your room," Mrs. Chen said. "I will bring up water for the bath. There is a bathing room just down the hall. Take your time, dear, you are safe here." The bath was heaven. Lily scrubbed away days of grime and fear, washing her hair until it felt clean again. Mrs. Chen had left a simple but well-made dress of blue cotton, undergarments that were new, and even stockings without holes. Everything fit reasonably well, though the dress was a bit loose. Lily supposed she had lost weight during her ordeal. When she emerged from the bathing room, she found Mrs. Chen waiting in the hall. "There is food in the kitchen when you are ready, or if you prefer, I can bring something to your room. Jackson thought you might want privacy." "I will come down," Lily said. She was tired of hiding, tired of fear. If she was going to stay here, even temporarily, she needed to understand what she was dealing with. The kitchen was large and warm, dominated by a massive iron stove that Mrs. Chen clearly ruled with practiced expertise. She set out bread, cold chicken, greens from the garden, and fresh milk. Lily ate while Mrs. Chen bustled about, preparing what looked like the beginnings of supper. "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to," Mrs. Chen said as she worked, "but I am a good listener if you need one." Lily found herself talking. Maybe it was the kindness in Mrs. Chen's eyes, or maybe it was just the relief of being safe and clean and fed. She told about her father's gambling, his death, the debts, the men who came and took her. She spoke about the journey to Benton, the fear of what would happen at the auction, and then Jackson's unexpected intervention. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting, her hands never stopping their work but her attention fully on Lily's words. When Lily finished, Mrs. Chen sat down across from her with a cup of tea. "That boy has his mother's heart," she said quietly. "Too good for this world sometimes, I worry. But he is not a fool and he is not weak. He will keep his word to you. You are safe here, truly safe. The question is what you want to do next." "He offered me a job," Lily said. "But I do not know what I could do on a ranch. I was raised in Boston. My skills are reading, writing, music, and embroidery. Not exactly useful here." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Oh, I would not say that. I am not getting any younger and this house is big. The ranch books need keeping, and Jackson's handwriting is atrocious. The men who work here cannot read or write much, and some of them would benefit from lessons if someone had time to teach. There is always mending, cooking, preserving food for winter. And if you can teach me some of those fancy stitches, I would count that a fair trade for teaching you how to make bread that does not come out like a brick. You make it sound like I would be helping you, when we both know it would be the other way around. Help goes both ways, dear. That is something you will learn if you stay. Now, you should rest. Take the afternoon to sleep or read or just sit. Tomorrow is soon enough to decide about the future." Lily went back to her room, intending to just sit by the window for a while, but the moment she lay down on the bed to test it, sleep claimed her like a wave. She slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in weeks. When she woke, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She could hear voices from somewhere outside, men talking and laughing. The sounds were not threatening, just the natural noise of people finishing a day's work. There was a gentle knock on her door. "Miss Ravencroft, it is Jackson. Mrs. Chen said you might want to join us for supper, but there is no obligation. I can have a tray sent up if you prefer." Lily opened the door. Jackson had cleaned up from the day's work. His hair was damp like he had recently washed, and he wore a fresh shirt. He stood a respectful distance from the door, his hat in his hands. "I will come down," she said. The dining room table was set for 3. Jackson at the head, Mrs. Chen on one side and a place for Lily on the other. The meal was simple but abundant. Roasted beef, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. They ate and talked of ordinary things. Jackson told stories about the ranch, about horses who had personalities like people, about a spring that never ran dry even in the worst droughts. Mrs. Chen contributed stories about her family in San Francisco, about her late husband who had worked on the railroad, about her decision to come to Montana Territory for a fresh start after his death. Lily realized she was relaxing, actually enjoying herself. These people were kind. The world had been so harsh for so long that she had almost forgotten kindness existed. After supper, Jackson excused himself to check on the horses one more time. Mrs. Chen and Lily cleaned up together, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying. When the kitchen was spotless, Mrs. Chen patted Lily's hand and headed to her own quarters, a small house behind the main building that she preferred for privacy. Lily found herself alone in the quiet house. She wandered into the main room and examined the books. There were classics, poetry, histories, and even some novels. She selected a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets and settled into one of the comfortable chairs near the fireplace. She was deep in the verses when Jackson returned. He paused in the doorway when he saw her. "I am sorry. I did not mean to disturb you." "You are not disturbing me. It is your house." "While you are here, it is your house too," he said. "May I join you, or would you prefer solitude? You may join me." He selected a book from the shelf and sat in the other chair. They read in companionable silence as the light faded and Jackson lit a lamp. After a while, Lily looked up and found him watching her. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking that it is nice to have someone who appreciates books. The men who work here are good people, but they are not much for reading. It gets lonely sometimes, having all these books and no one to discuss them with. Your parents were educated people. My father was a lawyer before he came west. He taught me to read before I could walk, or so he claimed. My mother was self-taught, but she read everything she could get her hands on. They believed education was the greatest gift they could give me. They sound like they were wonderful people. They were. I miss them every day." Jackson paused, then added quietly, "I apologize if I am keeping you from rest. You have been through an ordeal and here I am chattering about books. I slept all afternoon. I am not tired now, and your conversation is welcome, Mr. Fuller. Would you consider calling me Jackson? Mr. Fuller makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase." Lily smiled. "Only if you will call me Lily." "It would be my honor, Lily." The sound of her name in his voice sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She pushed the feeling aside. This man had saved her from a terrible fate. The last thing she needed was to complicate matters by developing feelings for him. He had made it clear she was free, that he expected nothing from her. She would not burden him with unwanted affection. But over the days that followed, Lily found it increasingly difficult to ignore the growing warmth she felt when Jackson was near. He was unfailingly kind, but not in a condescending way. He treated her like an equal, asked her opinions, listened to her answers. When she expressed interest in learning about the ranch, he took time to show her around, explaining the work with genuine enthusiasm. She met the ranch hands. Tom, a quiet man in his 40s who had a gift with horses. Sam and Pete, brothers in their 20s who handled most of the cattle work. And old Walter, who had been with Jackson's father from the beginning and now served as a combination advisor and grandfather figure to everyone on the ranch. All of them treated her with respect. Jackson had clearly laid down the law about how she was to be regarded, and his word was followed without question. Lily began helping Mrs. Chen with the household work, and discovered she enjoyed it. She took over the ranch accounts, organizing the ledgers and creating a system that made tracking expenses and income much simpler. She taught the younger ranch hands to read and write in the evenings, holding lessons in the bunkhouse by lamplight. She learned to cook, to preserve food, to mend clothes properly. She learned to ride a horse with Jackson as her patient teacher. Weeks passed, then months. Summer faded into autumn. The cottonwood trees turned gold and the air carried a crisp edge that promised winter. Lily found herself thinking less about leaving and more about staying. She had a place here, a purpose. She had friends in Mrs. Chen and the ranch hands, and she had Jackson, who had become something she could not quite define but knew was important. They spent evenings talking, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams for the future. Jackson told her about his plans to expand the ranch, to improve the breeding stock, to eventually buy the land that bordered his property to the north. Lily told him about her childhood in Boston, about the mother who had taught her to love literature and music, about the slow decline as her father's gambling destroyed everything. One evening in late October, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The air was cold enough that Lily had wrapped herself in a shawl, and Jackson had built a small fire in the porch's stone fire pit. "Lily," he said quietly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. You have been here almost 4 months now. You have earned enough in wages to travel anywhere you wish, to go back east if that is your desire. But you have not mentioned leaving recently. Have you decided to stay?" Lily looked at him, at the firelight playing across his features, at the hope and fear mixed in his expression. She realized in that moment that she loved him. She had probably loved him since the day he stood up at that auction and paid a fortune for her freedom. She loved his kindness, his strength, his intelligence, his unwavering integrity. She loved the way he listened to her, the way he respected her, the way he made her feel valued and seen. "I want to stay," she said. "If you still want me here, want you here." Jackson's voice was rough with emotion. "Lily, having you here has been the greatest gift. This house feels like a home again. The ranch runs better than it ever has, and I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I find myself looking forward to each day in a way I have not in years, knowing I will see you at breakfast, that we will talk in the evening, that you are here. It matters to me more than I can properly express." "Jackson, are you saying what I think you are saying?" He stood and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand carefully in his. "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Lily Ravencroft. I have tried not to. I swore to myself I would not burden you with my feelings. You came here with no choice, and I wanted you to be truly free. But I cannot keep silent any longer. I love you. And if there is any chance you might feel the same, I would count myself the most fortunate man alive." Lily felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy. "You foolish, wonderful man. Do you not know? Have you not seen? I love you too. I think I have loved you since you stood up in that crowd and refused to let them break me." Jackson's face transformed with joy. He reached up to gently wipe the tears from her cheeks. "May I kiss you?" "Yes, please, yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but Lily met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning this new language. Then it deepened, and Lily felt warmth flooding through her entire body. This was what she had read about in novels but never truly believed existed. This feeling of absolute rightness, of coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Lily. Be my wife, my partner, my love. Help me build this ranch into something extraordinary. Grow old with me." "Yes," Lily whispered. "Yes to all of it. Yes, forever." They were married in November in the small church in Benton. Mrs. Chen cried through the whole ceremony. The ranch hands cleaned up and served as groomsmen, looking uncomfortable in their best clothes but fiercely proud. Half the town turned out, most of them curious about the woman Jackson Fuller had bought and freed, and now was marrying. Lily wore a simple dress of ivory wool that Mrs. Chen had helped her make. Jackson wore a black suit that made him look unbearably handsome. They spoke their vows with clear voices and eyes only for each other. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn that had been cleaned and decorated within an inch of its life. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Old Walter made a toast that brought tears and laughter in equal measure. Mrs. Chen presented them with a quilt she had been secretly making, with panels that depicted scenes from their courtship. As night fell and the guests began to drift away, Jackson took Lily's hand and led her up to the house. He had given her his bedroom, the large master suite, and had been sleeping in a smaller room down the hall since she arrived. Tonight, for the first time, they would share that room as husband and wife. Jackson was gentle and patient, mindful of what she had endured before coming to him. He took his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Their wedding night was everything Lily had hoped for, tender and passionate and perfect. In the months that followed, Lily threw herself into life on the ranch with complete commitment. She expanded her teaching program, starting a small school that served not just the ranch hands, but also children from neighboring properties. She worked with Jackson on the ranch books, helping him make decisions about breeding stock and land purchases. She learned to shoot a rifle to tend sick animals, to predict weather by reading the sky and the behavior of the cattle. She and Jackson were partners in every sense of the word. They disagreed sometimes, argued occasionally, but always with respect, and always working toward resolution. They laughed together, worked together, dreamed together. Winter came hard that year, with storms that buried the ranch in snow. But the house was warm, the supplies were adequate, and Lily discovered she did not mind being snowed in with Jackson. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, playing chess, making love in the big bed while wind howled outside. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, the grass greened up, and Lily discovered she was pregnant. She told Jackson one morning at breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went absolutely still for a moment, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. Then he set it down carefully, came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Truly, we are going to have a child." "Truly. Mrs. Chen says I am about 3 months along. The baby should come in October." Jackson kissed her soundly, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Lily laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "I think it is a bit early for that." "Nonsense. It is never too early to let our child know they are loved and wanted." The pregnancy was healthy, though Lily dealt with morning sickness that Mrs. Chen combated with ginger tea and dry toast. Jackson was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly asking if she needed to sit down, if she was too tired, if she was eating enough. Lily tolerated it with good humor, knowing it came from love. She continued her work on the ranch, adjusting as her body changed. The school thrived, with 8 regular students now and talk of building a proper schoolhouse come fall. Jackson purchased the northern property he had wanted, expanding the ranch significantly. With Lily's help managing the finances, they were able to negotiate favorable terms and still maintain a healthy reserve. On a cool October evening, Lily's labor began. Mrs. Chen took charge immediately, sending Tom riding hard for the doctor in Benton while she prepared the bedroom. Jackson paced the hallway, driving Mrs. Chen to distraction until she finally gave him tasks: boiling water, preparing clean linens, anything to keep him busy and out of the way. The labor was long and hard. Lily clung to Mrs. Chen's hand, focusing on breathing, on getting through each contraction. The doctor arrived and pronounced everything normal, which was reassuring even as the pain intensified. Finally, as dawn broke on a new day, their son entered the world with a healthy wail. The doctor placed the baby on Lily's chest, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder. "A boy," she whispered. Jackson was at her side instantly, his eyes wet with tears. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you both so much." They named him James Franklin Fuller, honoring both of their fathers. Jamie, as he quickly became known, had Jackson's dark hair and Lily's green eyes. He was a content baby, easy to soothe, quick to smile. The ranch hands treated Jamie like a prince, carving him toys and singing him songs. Mrs. Chen knitted endless blankets and sweaters. Jackson was a devoted father, taking Jamie on rides around the property, reading to him even when he was too young to understand, teaching him to love the land and the life they were building. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family. Sarah Margaret Fuller had Lily's blonde hair and Jackson's gray eyes. She was fierce from the start, grabbing at everything within reach, demanding attention. Jamie adored his little sister, hovering over her cradle and bringing her treasures from outside: rocks, feathers, flowers. Life on the Fuller Ranch settled into a rhythm of work and joy. The ranch prospered. The herd grew. They purchased more land, built that schoolhouse, and expanded the main house to accommodate their growing family. Lily taught school, managed the household, and helped Jackson run the ranch. Jackson worked the land, improved the stock, and devoted himself to his family with unwavering commitment. Winters came and went. Summers blazed hot. Springs brought renewal, and autumns brought harvest. Through it all, Lily and Jackson stood together, their love deepening with each passing year. When Jamie was 10 and Sarah was 8, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two. She was older now, 32, and her body did not bounce back as easily. She spent much of the pregnancy on bed rest, frustrated at being sidelined but obedient to the doctor's orders. Jackson took on more of the household management, with help from Mrs. Chen and the children. Jamie proved surprisingly capable with the ranch books, showing an aptitude for numbers that pleased his parents. Sarah threw herself into cooking with Mrs. Chen, creating dishes that ranged from surprisingly good to utterly inedible with equal enthusiasm. The baby, another boy they named Daniel, arrived healthy but small. He needed extra care those first few months, and the whole household rallied around him. Gradually, he strengthened and grew, eventually catching up to where he should be. As Lily recovered from Daniel's birth, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From that terrible day on the auction block to this moment, surrounded by family and love, seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet it was real. Jackson was real, warm and solid beside her in their bed. The children were real, their laughter filling the house. The ranch was real, thriving under their combined efforts. One evening, when Daniel was about 6 months old, Lily and Jackson sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage whenever weather and circumstances allowed. Jamie and Sarah were doing homework inside under Mrs. Chen's supervision. Daniel slept peacefully in his cradle. "You ever think about that day?" Jackson asked quietly. "The day we met?" "Sometimes. It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else. I think about it often, about how close I came to losing you before I ever knew you. If I had been delayed in town by even an hour, someone else would have bought your debt. You would never have come here." We would never have had this life, these children. Lily took his hand, threading her fingers through his. But you were not delayed. You were exactly where you needed to be when you needed to be there. And you gave me something I can never repay, my freedom, my dignity, my life back. You gave me far more, Lily. You gave me love, family, purpose beyond just maintaining what my parents built. You helped me create something new, something ours. This ranch is as much yours as mine. These children are the greatest gift I could imagine. You are my partner, my love, my everything. And you are mine. I love you, Jackson Fuller. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Inside the house, they could hear Sarah laughing at something Jamie said, and then Mrs. Chen's voice gently correcting them about something. Daniel stirred but settled back to sleep without waking. The years continued to pass with remarkable swiftness. Jamie grew into a young man who combined his father's work ethic with his mother's intellectual curiosity. He attended college in the East, studying agriculture and business, then returned to the ranch with new ideas for improving operations. Sarah became a teacher, taking over the school Lily had founded and expanding it further. She married a young lawyer from Benton, a good man named Thomas Hayes who reminded Lily a bit of Jackson in his quiet integrity. Daniel, the baby, turned out to have a gift with horses that surpassed even Tom's legendary skill. Jackson's hair went gray at the temples, then fully silver. Lily's blonde hair gained streaks of white. They moved a bit slower, their joints protesting the hard work of ranch life. But they never stopped working, never stopped building, never stopped loving. Mrs. Chen passed peacefully in her sleep at 78, surrounded by the family she had helped raise. They buried her on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree she had loved, with a headstone that read, Ruth Chen, beloved friend and family. Her loss left a hole in their lives, but her legacy lived on in everything she had taught them. Old Walter followed her a year later. Then Tom. Then, one by one, the men who had been there from the beginning. New workers came, good men who Jackson and Jamie trained and integrated into the ranch family. The work continued. When Jackson was 60 and Lily was 52, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The whole family gathered at the ranch. Jamie and his wife Alina with their 3 children, Sarah and Thomas with their 2, Daniel and his new bride Mary. The house rang with laughter and love. That evening, after everyone had retired to their rooms or the bunkhouse, Jackson and Lily walked out to the spot where he had first brought her, that hill overlooking the ranch. The view had not changed much. The ranch was bigger, more buildings, more fences, but the essential character remained the same. 30 years, Jackson said wonderingly. It seems like yesterday and forever ago all at once. Best 30 years of my life, Lily said, though the ones before were necessary to bring me to you. I have been thinking about the future, about what happens when I am gone. Jackson Fuller, do not talk like that. Hush, love. We both know neither of us will live forever. I want to make sure everything is arranged properly. The ranch will go to Jamie, but there are provisions for Sarah and Daniel, and for you, of course. You will be taken care of for the rest of your days. I know you will take care of me. You always have, but I do not intend to outlive you by much. Where you go, I go. We are partners, remember. Jackson pulled her close, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms as the stars came out above them. Partners, he agreed, now and always. They had 10 more good years. 10 years of watching grandchildren grow, of seeing the ranch continue to prosper, of quiet evenings and simple joys. They grew old together with grace, supporting each other through aches and pains and the inevitable limitations of aging. Jackson died at 70, his heart finally giving out after a lifetime of hard work. He went peacefully in his sleep, with Lily beside him. She woke that morning to find him cold and still, his face peaceful. She did not cry right away. She simply held his hand and talked to him, telling him about the sunrise, about the children and grandchildren who would miss him, about how much she loved him and always would. The funeral was massive. People came from all over Montana territory to pay their respects. Jackson had been a respected rancher, a fair employer, a good neighbor. But more than that, he had been a good man. Person after person told stories of his kindness, his integrity, his generosity. Lily stood strong through it all, her children on either side of her. She would grieve, deeply and truly, but she would do it with the same courage Jackson had always loved in her. She lived 3 more years after Jackson's passing. 3 years of watching Jamie run the ranch with skill and compassion. 3 years of teaching Sarah's children to read and love books. 3 years of watching Daniel gentle horses and build a life with Mary. 3 years of holding great-grandchildren and telling them stories about their remarkable great-grandfather. On a warm summer evening, Lily sat on the porch in her rocking chair, a quilt over her lap even in the heat. Jamie sat with her, reading aloud from a novel she had particularly enjoyed. She closed her eyes, listening to his voice, and felt a great sense of peace. "Mama," Jamie asked, noticing she had gone very still. Lily opened her eyes and smiled at him. "I am fine, darling, just resting. It has been a good life, has it not?" "The best," Jamie agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Tell your brother and sister I love them. Tell all my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Tell them to love each other, to work hard, to choose kindness always. That is what your father would want." "Mama, you can tell them yourself." But Lily was already drifting, the peace in her heart spreading through her whole being. She thought of Jackson, of the life they had built from ashes and pain and a single act of extraordinary kindness. She thought of their children, their legacy continuing through generations. She thought of that young woman on the auction block, terrified and alone, and the man who had given her the most precious gift, the freedom to choose love. Lily Ravencroft Fuller passed gently from this world surrounded by love, her hand in her son's, her heart full. They buried her beside Jackson under the cottonwoods, their headstones side by side, testifying to a love that had transformed 2 lives and created something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. The Fuller Ranch continues to this day, run by descendants who still tell the story of their remarkable ancestors. The story of a rancher who paid double to set a woman free and the woman who chose to love him. It is a story of courage, of kindness, of love overcoming impossible circumstances. It is a story that reminds everyone who hears it that a single act of compassion can change the world, one heart at a time. Jamie and his children made sure that Lily's school became a permanent institution in Benton, eventually expanding into a full academy that educated children from throughout the territory. They established a scholarship fund in Jackson and Lily's names for students who showed promise but lacked means. Every year on the anniversary of that fateful auction, the family gathered at the ranch to remember and celebrate the love story that had started it all. The main house was preserved and expanded carefully over the years, with each generation adding to it but maintaining its essential character. The library grew to fill 2 rooms, all the books Jackson and Lily had loved plus countless more. Their bedroom was kept as a sort of shrine, not morbid but respectful, with their personal items displayed. Jackson's pocket watch, Lily's favorite books, their wedding photograph, letters they had written to each other during the rare times they were apart. Sarah's descendants became lawyers and teachers, carrying on a tradition of education and justice. Daniels became ranchers and horsemen, masters of the land and animals. Jamie's took on the Fuller Ranch itself, each generation building on what had come before, guided by the principles Jackson and Lily had established. Hard work, fair dealing, and compassion above all. The story spread beyond the family, becoming something of a legend in Montana. In Benton, they eventually erected a historical marker on the spot where the auction had taken place, telling the story of Jackson Fuller's act of defiance and love. It became a place where couples visited, touching the marker for luck, hoping some of that extraordinary love might bless their own relationships. Every detail of their life together became part of the family history, carefully preserved and passed down. How Jackson had spent $800, a fortune in those days, without hesitation. How he had offered Lily freedom instead of demanding her servitude. How she had chosen to stay, to love him, to build a life with him. How they had created a family and a legacy that extended far beyond themselves. The values they had lived by became the foundation for everything their descendants did. When Jamie faced difficult decisions about the ranch, he would ask himself what his father would have done. When Sarah struggled with challenging students, she remembered her mother's patience and creativity. When Daniel worked with a particularly difficult horse, he channeled both parents' combination of firmness and gentility. Their grandchildren grew up hearing stories about Jackson and Lily at bedtime, learning from their example even though they never knew them personally. The great-grandchildren did the same. Generation after generation, the story was told and retold, each time reinforcing the core message. Love is a choice, freedom is precious, and kindness can change everything. The ranch itself became a testament to their love. Every building, every fence, every acre of land had been touched by their hands or existed because of their vision. Walking the property, you could still feel their presence, still sense the care and thought they had put into every decision. The cottonwood trees they had planted grew massive, providing shade for generations of children. The spring that Jackson had shown Lily on one of their first rides together still bubbled clear and cold, watering the cattle that bore the Fuller brand. In later years, historians became interested in Jackson and Lily's story as part of studying the settlement of Montana Territory. They found the auction records, the legal documents showing the debt purchase and immediate release, the marriage certificate. They interviewed descendants, collected letters and photographs, pieced together a picture of two remarkable people who had lived with extraordinary integrity. A book was written, then another. Their story was taught in schools as an example of how one person's courage and compassion could make a real difference. Young women learned about Lily, about her strength in the face of degradation, her courage to accept help, her wisdom in choosing love. Young men learned about Jackson, about standing up for what is right regardless of cost, about treating all people with dignity, about the true meaning of strength. But for the family, Jackson and Lily were not historical figures or moral exemplars. They were simply Grandpa Jackson and Grandma Lily, beloved ancestors who had started it all. They were the couple in the faded photographs, their eyes always finding each other even when looking at the camera. They were the names on the headstones under the cottonwoods, visited regularly with fresh flowers and quiet conversations sharing family news. The Fuller Ranch thrived through economic downturns and natural disasters, through wars and technological changes, always adapting but never losing sight of its foundation. When automobiles replaced horses for transportation, the Fullers adapted but kept breeding horses for ranch work and pleasure. When modern farming techniques emerged, They incorporated the best while maintaining sustainable practices that honored the land. Through everything, the family remained focused on the core values: work hard, deal fairly, show compassion. Each generation produced its own love stories, its own examples of courage and commitment. But they all looked back to Jackson and Lily as the template, the gold standard. Marriages were measured against that first partnership of equals, that deep respect and abiding love that had lasted until death and beyond. The blue dress that Lily had worn on her first day at the ranch, carefully preserved by Mrs. Chen, and then by Lily herself, was eventually placed in a museum display about frontier life. Beside it was Jackson's white shirt from that same day, the one he had worn when he stood up at the auction. Together, they told a story more powerful than words, a story of two people meeting in the worst possible circumstances and creating the best possible life. Jamie lived to 93, long enough to see his own great-great-grandchildren born. He never stopped telling stories about his parents, never stopped marveling at what they had built from nothing. On his last day, surrounded by family in the house where he had grown up, his final words were about them. They loved each other so well. They taught us how. Remember that. Love well. Sarah and Daniel both lived into their late 80s, both active until the end, both devoted to preserving and sharing their parents' legacy. Between the three siblings, they ensured that every detail of Jackson and Lily's story was documented, preserved, passed on. Nothing was lost to time or fading memory. The grandchildren, in turn, did the same for their children. The story never faded, never became less important. If anything, it grew more precious with each passing year, a reminder of what was possible when love and courage came together. On the 100th anniversary of Jackson and Lily's wedding, the family held a massive celebration at the ranch. Hundreds of descendants gathered, spanning 6 living generations. They toured the property, visited the graves, shared stories, and celebrated the love that had started it all. The youngest member of the family, a baby girl named Lily Rose, was 6 months old. The oldest, Jamie's daughter Alina, was 85. All of them were there because of that day in July 1878 when a rancher named Jackson Fuller decided that some things were worth any price. As the sun set on that anniversary celebration, the family gathered on the hillside where Jackson and Lily had stood so many times. Someone read aloud from Lily's journal, an entry she had written on their 10th anniversary. 10 years ago today, I married the man who gave me freedom and then, by his love, taught me what freedom truly means. It is not just the absence of chains, but the presence of choice. Every day I choose him. Every day he chooses me. That is the greatest gift, to be chosen and to choose in return over and over, building a life one choice at a time. The words resonated across the generations, as true for them as they had been for Lily when she wrote them. Love was still a choice. Freedom was still precious. Kindness still changed everything. Those truths transcended time, remaining as relevant to modern descendants as they had been to that young woman on an auction block and the rancher who refused to let her be sold. As darkness fell and stars emerged in the vast Montana sky, the family slowly dispersed, heading back to the house or the bunkhouse or the hotel rooms in Benton where some were staying. But they all carried with them a renewed sense of connection to Jackson and Lily, to each other, to the legacy they all shared. The Fuller Ranch stands strong even now, a living monument to a love story that began in the darkest circumstances and bloomed into something beautiful. The cattle still graze the hills, the horses still run in the pastures, the cottonwoods still provide shade. And beneath them, Jackson and Lily rest side by side, their love story complete, their legacy secure, their example enduring for as long as there are hearts to be touched by the power of compassion, courage, and true love freely chosen.